the topic that was handed to me, of course, is quite a lofty topic to talk about. But what I will try to do is relate with some experiences I have had with some global multinationals, how they engage employees and customers towards a shared objective and vision for change in the organization. Some that I have first-hand witnessed. I have been fortunate enough to witness first-hand, and some that, of course, I have read about and learned and appreciated how they went about doing that. So broadly, I will hover around the theme of this session, which is obviously engaging customers and employees the LESS way, and I'll try to do justice to both perspectives. But I guess I'll weigh a little bit more towards the customer. Perhaps it's my pet peeve that I see in organizations how often they miss the seemingly obvious point of trying to understand what the customer's needs are and being able to deliver processes or being able to engineer processes to deliver those specific needs. But of course, I will also talk about the employee engagement and briefly share a case study with you how the employee engagement was enhanced through LESS tools. How there's more of trying to look at it from the people's perspective and understanding what really is the antithesis to engagement and try to address those issues. I thought just to a slight digression, I'm going to touch a little bit upon some of the PPE trends which a group of experts recently put together. I thought I'll try to bring some context to the discussion on hand. Starting with what these three generations of PPE has evolved over the years. If you see, starting with the early 80s, where Six Sigma was evolving, and the focus was more on quality. How do we measure quality? How do we enhance quality? The line of sight, in essence, with other aspects was limited. But in the 90s, and of course going to the 2000s, it has evolved to focus on reducing costs, and then the buzzword. I was really impressed when I came across this buzzword, customization. I really came across this very recently when I was researching for this presentation, and it made a lot of sense. It's simply what it's trying to, the terminology, I don't think it's an English dictionary, you will find that word, but the terminology really means how do you enhance revenue of the organization through driving customer preference. So I am going to touch a little bit upon the Net Promoter Score as well, and sorry about the overlap, but I'll try to not talk about those aspects which you already touched upon. And another, as a segue to that, another interesting observation I observed was the indicators of success. More and more companies are attributing these as indicators of success, of increasing customer satisfaction and cultural change. So, engaging with both those themes of this session. So it looks like now companies are awakening across sectors to this essential factor. How do you engage customers and employees towards a shared vision for the corporation? And the third important observation that I wanted to share with you was how the one way in which engagement is driven is through linkages with the KRAs and objectives of employees. And so many times I've seen in so many organizations that the support varies to a large extent in terms of how at the end of the year somebody is going to be measured in the organization and to what extent he is going to be appreciated or reprimanded for his performance. So obviously it is good to be engaged in the LESS program in the organization, but at the end of the year what matters is against what parameters someone is measured. And so that's very evident. You can see that those organizations which have very little linkages, the success is also quite weak. So these are some aspects I wanted to touch upon, very fresh from the Owen research published by the team. And so I just wanted to explore as a next point what really is customer engagement, and I would like to bring what maybe some personal thoughts and also some of the talks going around. To me, customer engagement, of course, Apple is probably the epitome of customer engagement. I'm an Apple fanatic myself, so I can really relate to what it really means to engage customers. If you see in the US, people queue up outside the stores before Apple launches a product. There's so much buzz around it. You go and search online, people will come with 10 different versions of how the iPhone 5 is going to look like, what features the iPad 3 will bring, and so on. People are so crazy about it. So just some observation. What really drives that sort of customer engagement? Customer feels is part of the organization. Very simple, if you really ask me. Listening to the customer. Of course, Steve Jobs was such a mercurial guy. he had this innate ability to understand what next feature that needs to be built into the product, which the customer is going to really get a delight of. It is not necessarily that Apple runs very structured customer surveys to understand what features to be built into the next product. Of course, I do wonder what's going to happen now that Steve Jobs has passed away, and but I hope that culture will prevail in the organization. So trying to understand what really matters to the customer and responding to changing customer needs, and more importantly, augmenting internal resources to manage rapidly changing needs. I was just witnessing one of the interviews of Steve Jobs, and he said Apple is probably one of the most it's the world's largest startup. He said that it's such a big company, but still the culture in the organization is that of a startup. So for every key task in the organization, there is one person who's driving it. Like when Safari was adapted for the iPad from Mac, there was one person or a team of 2 people who were doing the entire coding, and that was, I believe, a sea of coding to be done in order to adapt it. So he has this very interesting concept of DRI, directly responsible individual. And so, things like that. How do you respond more efficiently, more swiftly to changing customer needs? I think those are some of the mantra by which organizations are driving customer engagement. Moving on, I thought from a process perspective, since this forum is about Lean Six Sigma and relating it with internal processes in the organization, I want to relate it to the airline industry. If you typically look at, of course, this is something I witnessed one of the great thinkers of Lean Six Sigma and customer engagement, and this is an inspiration from what I witnessed quite recently. If you really look at from a process perspective, there are 2 ways in which you can look at a process. There is a customer process, which is nothing but what the customer experiences. And no matter how complex the organization is, and no matter 100,000 people or 500,000 people work within the organization, for the customer process is very simple. Like in an airline industry, the process is, he books a ticket, he goes to the airport, and so on and so on. So maybe 4 or 5 steps, this process is delivered. But what really goes on within the organization? You have customer support, you have IT, you have the HR, sales, and so on. So there are multitude of processes within the organization, and there are a lot of interconnections in the process going on. So where is the customer need captured in the whole system? So there are disconnects, right? And let's not deny that in the airline industry, not everyone gets the same infrastructure, but not everyone lives up to the same service standards, right? Some airlines are really efficient in things like transporting your bags from point A to point B and doing it right every time, and some airlines just don't seem to get it. So again, what is important is the organization really sensitive to where the customer fits into the whole scheme of things within the process, and how those processes are set up within the organization. So can it be done differently? I strongly do believe that yes, it can be done differently, and people have done it differently. And let's look at one example of Southwest Airlines in the US. I read up somewhere that Southwest is the airline that has set the record for most consecutive number of years of registering profitable growth, and the last time I read was around 31 years, maybe it's more. It has never registered a loss, and it's not only due to oil hedging, some may argue. Yes, it is a factor, but you can't do that over a period of 31 years with just one strategy. So what did Southwest Airlines do differently? It's simple things. They got the simple things right. On one aspect, engaging customers, and also about engaging employees to be able to serve the customers better. So a few other things, I don't know if you're familiar with some of the things that they do. For example, they can come up with innovations like you can check in your bags at the resort. Suppose you went to Disney Resort for a vacation in Orlando. They give you a facility, you can check in your bags, and you can check into the plane right at the resort. So you're just in your shorts and sitting in the bus and not worrying about all the hassle you have to go through in the airport and so on. So other things, of course, not losing sight of what is important to the customer, like getting, making sure that the tickets are of the lowest fare, and so on and so forth, and not losing your bags. They still allow you to check in bags for free, which is something you never hear about in any of the American airlines. And some of the things they got right is, apart from factoring the customer in all their processes, also factoring in a great degree of employee engagement. There's a sense of joy. If you just look at if any of you have flown Southwest Airlines, you would witness there's a sense of joy and cheer among the employees, and it's not fake. Genuinely, they are cheerful, and how they do that, they are treated like family. About 10% of the company stocks is owned by the employees. So they have a very strong personal stake in the growth of the organization, and so on and so forth. Don't get me wrong, I'm not enamored by just the American companies. Closer to home, we have Indigo Airline, and every time I overhear, being a Lean Six Sigma consultant, I'm very curious to know what people are saying about brands. I always overhear when I travel in the bus going to the plane, and what people are saying, and oftentimes I hear this conversation about how people are raving about Indigo Airlines and how they get the simple things right. For example, I was really impressed when they got the ramp to go up to the plane, which nobody really thought about. So it's again, it's not about changing when the situation demands you to change, but it's about changing when there is no pressing reason for you to change, and changing to be able to serve the customer better. I think those are some of the key takeaway that I would leave you with in terms of engaging customers more efficiently. And of course, measuring loyalty, the previous session already covered it, so I won't go too much into it. But Net Promoter Score seems to be the very popular metric by which customer loyalty and engagement is being measured. And it's such a ridiculously simple measure. It is simply put the percentage of people that love you and would like to recommend you, minus the percentage of people who really don't care about you, who would probably not recommend you to someone who would need a similar service. And I have a small video to present about Net Promoter Score. Probably get an idea of how some of the large corporations are.
Hi, I'm Brown. I'm Executive Director of Social Media at Dell. Net Promoter Score is one of many statistics that we watch very carefully at Dell. In fact, NPS has kind of a special place in Dell employees' hearts because on our employee intranet, it's up in the top right-hand corner of the page right next to our stock ticker. That's how important we believe NPS is. What NPS helps us understand is what people are saying about our company and about our brand online. It's promoters minus detractors. So we really want to focus on what those people are saying. At Dell, there's about 22,000 conversations every day online that mention Dell. What we want to do is make sure that we can impact those when they're negative and turn them into positive and help solve people's problems. So Net Promoter Score is just one score and analytic in our arsenal that we watch very carefully on almost a daily basis. Now, NPS is a quarterly type of statistic. NPS organization actually updates it 4 times a year. So what we're actually trying to do inside is actually find ways to kind of track that same type of NPS score in an almost real-time basis.
So there was just one example. I mean, how you do it, there are software and there are ways to do it, but the organization becomes so much more nimble, so much more agile in responding to changing customer needs.
Progressive companies are changing.
So here's another example of how a company like Bank of America, how they're engaging customers, how they're using technology like social media to engage
Progressive
customers.
companies are changing how they service their customers. And one of those companies is Bank of America. In Bank of America, if you go to Twitter, and you go to twitter.com/BofAHelp, they didn't open their new branch at Bank of America down the street or on the corner or across from Starbucks. They opened their new branch of Bank of America on Twitter. That's pretty awesome. Now we know because we built it with them. And you know that because you'll see that as they are talking to their customers, these tweets are coming not exactly from them, it says from via CRM. Now why is that? Why would it say there on that tweet, Rana V. Gonzalez, I work for Bank of America, were you able to get it resolved? Is there anything I can do to help? Via CRM. Because what they're doing is taking those tweets and they are threading them into your account records. They're paying attention to you. They're building that customer social profile. They are learning as much about you as they can because they want to give you a better experience. And when you get on Twitter, they're going to know, oh yeah, oh, it's Mark again. I know Mark. Oh yeah, we had this conversation with Mark a month ago. He needs this help. Okay, I'm gonna tweet Mark right back. Or I'm gonna have Mark call me now. So maybe we need to pass some private information back and forth, whatever it is. But you see it right on Twitter. That is progressive.
Anyway, so companies are going the extra mile. That's the bottom line, really. So technology is available, but if the attitude is not there, then technology is not going to help. So I will just touch upon one last example of logistics, of a worldwide leader in logistics, which I had the privilege of witnessing across several countries, and how they engage customers. And this was an engagement. Of course, they branded it nicely, but here They went across different touch points that the customer, how the company engages with the customer. If you recall the process that I showed, how in an airline case there are 4 or 5 stages in which the process evolves as the customer experiences. Similarly, in a logistic company, there are 7 or 8 touch points. And every touch point, there are certain expectations of CDQs, like we call it the Six Sigma language. And customer rates you, differently based on how you perform against those CDQs. And taking those metrics or those measures, they really drill down into internal processes. So they demonstrate a very good example of an outside-in organization. An outside-in organization it does not, the trigger for any process improvement or re-engineering comes from a customer pain or a customer dissatisfaction, and you look at the right process within the organization, which typically cuts across various functions and various geographies in some cases, and being able to re-engineer those processes. And don't leave it at that. Look how you fare in those net promoter score against those criteria, against those CTQs that you were rated badly in the past, and how you fare against those criteria in the annual survey, and so on. Okay. Yeah, I guess then I'll just give this case how they went into. So this was the in customer support how they improved employee engagement. And customer support, it's not it's very difficult for organizations. That's why they're outsourcing it, but that's not the solution in itself. So they really suffered with a lot of attrition because of various reasons, and this was one of the first initiatives that they really took up. So you'll be surprised what has this got to do with customer engagement. Of course, the guys at the customer support, if they're not engaged, if they're not really passionate about what they do, that's really not going to drive anything you do as part of first choice or as part of customer engagement. So there are a lot of things, simple things like people were, the appraisals were delayed and training was delayed, they didn't have a mentor, they were just hanging around and they were working extended hours and so on and so forth. So very interesting project that they did and really improved their satisfaction levels and so on. Okay, maybe just a couple of slides. SSA is we are management consultants and primarily operating in the Lean Six Sigma domain and also into strategy and change management and some other countries and clients we have consulted. If you're interested, we can talk more in the way about something. So thanks a lot.